I am your president of law and order.
Let's talk about the far right.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Some hear his words as a call to action.
You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Invade the Capitol building.
Do the right thing.
Take the Capitol.
They're loyalists who heed the leader's words.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
And follow their every move to a T. We have seen these movements rise in Italy once again with the election of Giorgia Meloni. India continuing to elect Narendra Modi, who has waged a war against Muslims, clinging to a deeply popular version of Hindu nationalism. Argentinians believing Javier Milei was the right choice, with demonstrations taking place outside Congress, Brazil leaving Bolsonaro behind, but for how long, and of course stateside, the potential re-election of Donald Trump appearing more and more likely.
Qu'on me donne une raison, une seule, pour garder sur notre territoire des étrangers qui collaborent avec une idéologie totalitaire qui veut la mort des Français.
Now France is at the center of the discussion with far-right darling Marine Le Pen. She has championed all the talking points expected of a figure placed in this position, following the footsteps of her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who has a troubling history of his own. When 6 million Jewish people were killed by the Schmazis, the man who founded Front National was kicked out after describing the Holocaust as a detail of history. The elder Le Pen saw an opportunity to target the France national team, suggesting there are too many players of color in the squad, adding France cannot recognize itself in the national side, and that maybe the coach exaggerated the proportion of players of color and should have been a bit more careful. He kept on with the attacks when France, led by Zinedine Zidane of Algerian descent and star forward Thierry Henry, won the World Cup. Marine has simply followed suit.
And in fact, his daughter, Marie Le Pen, who's now a popular politician in the right wing in France, as late as 2010 said that she was worried about immigrants being on the French national team because they have, quote, another nationality in their hearts.
It's because this is what their party clings to, bigotry masquerading as a policy position in the form of immigration. She railed against Karim Benzema when the ex-Real Madrid man claimed manager Didier Deschamps crumbled to pressure of racists in the country. She'd say, I find the declaration scandalous. I'm not surprised Mr. Benzema hides his wickedness behind a violent charge against the French people. Benzema is an easy target for Le Pen and co., as he too is of Algerian descent. In addition, Marine went after French citizens with dual citizenship, saying, and I quote, they must choose. They are Algerian or French, Moroccan or French. They can't be both. And like her father, she made outrageous comments in regards to the Holocaust. She'd suggest France was not responsible for the wartime roundup of Jews who were sent to Schmazi death camps. According to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, some 1,000 Jews were deported to Auschwitz every 2 or 3 days in the 2 months following the arrest at Veldihiv. Nearly 38,000 Jews had been deported to Auschwitz from France by the end of September 1942. By 1945, just 780 of them remained alive. Now the team and Le Pen are at the center of France again. After President Emmanuel Macron surprisingly called for new elections 3 years ahead of schedule, which takes place over 2 rounds on June 30th and July 7th, Le Pen's party is eyeing the seizure of control. Like the influence of Marine from Jean-Marie, Zinedine Zidane did influence one of France's biggest stars today.
On sait qu'on est dans un moment très important de l'histoire de notre pays, une situation inédite. Donc c'est pour ça que j'ai vraiment envie de m'adresser à tout le peuple français et surtout à la jeune génération.
It's superstar Kylian Mbappe.
Je pense qu'on est une génération qui peut faire la différence. Aujourd'hui, on voit très bien que les extrêmes sont aux portes du pouvoir et on a l'opportunité de choisir le futur de notre pays. Et c'est pour ça que j'appelle à tous les jeunes d'aller voter, de vraiment prendre conscience de l'importance de la situation.
Of course, his stance was not welcomed by members of Le Pen's National Rally Party. Go figure. Sebastian Chenu, the vice president of the RN, carried out a similar attack we have seen from many politicians. He'd say just prior to France's opening match at the Euros, when you have the chance, the honor of wearing the jersey of the French team, you have to show a little restraint. The Telegraph would add that Chenu suggested that the country's national football hero stick to his own lane and stay out of politics, and that the French do not need people who are very far removed from their daily concerns to come and tell them how to vote. This came as 160 French athletes signed an open letter to insist on rejecting Le Pen and the like from taking more power. One of those names, a national team player, Marcus Thuram, the son of Lilian, who was targeted by Le Pen's father years back.
On a besoin de s'identifier à nos valeurs qui sont des valeurs de mixité, de tolérance, de respect. Et ça, c'est indéniable.
Trying to intimidate people by getting on and see their signatures and their names and putting it on your camera.
In a wild video out of Arkansas, while activists and candidates were collecting signatures for ballot measures, with the upcoming elections in November taking place, we see a textbook case of voter intimidation in action and the lengths right-wingers are willing to go to limit the freedoms of anyone who does not agree with them.
The abortion amendment is to provide that abortion services
They already signed. They
assisted by
came
a
specifically to
physician.
sign it.
Just imagine the nerve and entitlement it must take to feel comfortable enough to lecture people specifically there to support securing a woman's right to reproductive autonomy. And despite the impressive box-out technique and no BS attitude from Justice of the Peace candidate Layla Chisholm, he still would not let up.
They already can
In
read.
fact,
You
I have a
should
copy of it if you'd like to read it.
copy on the back of every petition, sir. Please get away. You're harassing. You follow me around to multiple locations. This is harassment on us, Bob.
Call the police.
I'm getting lawsuit ready, Bob.
Okay.
The laugh and smile on his face say it all, don't it? And even though this isn't a polling location and he's not interfering in a sanctioned election, he is using the same voter intimidation tactics that the Republicans have exploited for decades now. And with Laura Trump calling the shots at the RNC, we can expect a lot more of this to happen.
We will have trained poll watchers, poll observers, poll workers, people in tabulation centers all across this country. If you want to volunteer as a poll watcher, poll worker, or a volunteer lawyer, because we want those as well, DonaldJTrump.com, GOP.com. We want you. We can leave nothing to chance. We have to fight fire with dynamite in this election. We must win on November 5th.
The Republican Party has really struck gold with their fraudulent election integrity talking point. They know the concept of fairness plays well with the base, from pushing culture wars like trans athletes in pro sports, so selling the false notion that our elections are rigged, as Trump would say, while simultaneously selling themselves as the solution and the party that cares about election integrity. Uninformed voters won't stop and think about the repercussions of empowering the party that is openly eroding as many democratic processes as possible. Those are the voters the Republican Party has been and will always be targeting the most.
Sir.
Bob, that was very kind of you. Thank you.
I want to make sure everybody knows who the harassers are in this town. His name is Bob.
Current
Yeah,
Arkansas
you're
law
obviously
prohibits
doing the
abortion
same thing.
except to save the life of the
Gonna
pregnant
save the
female in a
pregnant
medical
woman.
emergency.
That's right. You can save pregnant
And
women.
A massive shout out goes to the former District 77 State House candidate Grant Smith for filming and posting this video to show the reality of boots on the ground efforts to pass meaningful legislation, and previously mentioned Layla Chisholm, who seems to have a history with Bob here for putting him in his place and protecting the identities of the signees. Chisholm is currently running for Justice of the Peace in Arkansas's 2nd District, advocating for government transparency, workers' rights, and reproductive rights, among other progressive policies aimed at helping working-class families. While unsuccessful in his past 2 attempts at the Arkansas 77th District representative seat, Grant Smith has continued connecting with his community through the Arkansas for Direct Democracy organization, collecting signatures for key ballot petitions like legalizing medical cannabis, abortion access, government transparency, and improving the state's education system, just to name a few. Oftentimes, we get so lost in the sauce of national politics and the implications of national elections that we forget about the countless hours of hard labor that go into petitioning for signatures from voters for ballot measures that may not pass come election time, or may not even make it to the ballot at all. Especially in deep red states like Arkansas, leftists, progressives, and even many libs feel left behind and disenfranchised by their local politicians in the DNC. So people like Chisholm and Smith deserve praise, not just for sticking it to Bob the harasser, but for fighting the good fight when the odds are stacked so heavily against them. Because when you have people like this running your state and representing you to the rest of the country.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore. I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
Today, we're taking a stand against woke nonsense. What frankly started as a fad among a few grad students has seeped down into corporations, the healthcare industry, and increasingly state government. It's demeaning to women, and it needs to stop. In a moment, I'll sign an executive order banning a number of all sorts of ridiculous words from state government documents. Those include words like pregnant people, laboring person, birth giver, and several other nonsense terms that have cropped up in recent years.
If you live in Arkansas, please do your part in kicking these clowns out of office as soon as possible. And be sure to sign on to the ballot measure petitions that will be attached in the description box below. Red states are only red states because of the legalized corruption allowed by our political system. But there are ways to take that power back to swing the state in a positive direction.
I just want to say, I've talked to all the other networks, but I ain't going nowhere other than TNT. But I have made the decision myself, no matter what happens, next year is going to be my last year on television. And I just want to say thank you to my NBA family. You guys been great to me. My heart is full with joy and gratitude. But I'm going to pass the baton at the end of next year.
Legendary broadcaster and NBA Hall of Famer Charles Barkley hinted at retirement.
We don't know what would happen to the show if we lose it, but it really doesn't do us any good to try to make any plans until we lose the package or hear something.
Yeah.
So, and I think the limbo is probably the weirdest dynamic of the whole thing.
Sure.
We can't even have an honest discussion like, hey, would you go to here? Would you go to here?
Right.
We're like, you know what, let's just wait. Because and that goes back to my original point. None of this means anything because we still got to work together for another year.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, it doesn't do us any good. Hey, would you guys go to Amazon? Hey, would you guys go to NBC? Would you guys go to ESPN? I'm like, dude, we got another year to be together. So worrying about something that's a year and a half away is really just kind of stupid.
Which was a far cry from his interview with SI's Jimmy Trana.
Charles says a lot of things, and there are times when I go, I don't believe that you believe that. This one felt like, maybe that is true.
A man who has known Charles for decades, Dan Patrick, believes Charles meant what he said, that retirement is on the horizon.
I hope the NBA stays with TNT, but for me personally, I wanted you guys to hear from me because I'm not doing any more interviews. Don't y'all be calling me. Nobody calling me. I'm not talking about this again, but I want to tell my NBA and NBA TV and TNT family that I'm not going to another network, but I'm going to pass the baton to either Jamal Crawford or Vince Carter or you, Steve. But next year, I'm going to just retire after 25 years, and I just want to say thank you.
It seems more legit than ever because of what we know with David Zaslav leading the way for Warner Brothers Discovery in these ongoing negotiations. But is it legit? Sports Media Watch printed an article 2 days ago where they went through all the times Sir Charles would threaten retirement. The grand total was 9 times, shout out Ferris Bueller, ranging from his playing days to his broadcasting days. Then, in an interview with The Athletic, he gave quotes saying he would retire by 60. He is now 61 years of age. One should also not forget.
There is this rumor I've heard from a couple people in the golf world that the Live Tour is coming after you as like a face of their media, like an analyst or something like that. Is there any truth to that, or is this just rumor?
I'm going to meet with Liv.
So there is some truth.
Truth, to be always transparent and honest. They called me and asked me would I meet with them, and I said yes.
He toyed with the idea of joining Live Golf, even meeting with Greg Norman, only then to solidify a deal with TNT that paid him roughly $100 million over 10 years with the chance of reaching $200 million. Let's just have a pause here for a moment and go over the history inside of the history. Because you see, we saw the likes of Tom Brady retire from the National Football League, ponder getting into broadcasting, and then landing a humongous deal with Fox Sports. We saw a former quarterback who worked for Fox Sports, Troy Aikman, get a bag from ESPN as they kept the Buck-Aikman duo together for Monday Night Football. Charles Barkley saw all of this and said, and I quote at one point, "Listen, if somebody gave me $200 million, I'd kill a relative," close quote. He would then get a massive deal that was between $100 million and $200 million, with that figure ranging over 10 years. And then, shout out to the Ringer's Brian Curtis, because he put together a fantastic write-up of all this as well. Barkley's skill as a negotiator relies on two qualities. First, he's the most finely tuned quote machine in NBA history. A typical Charles soundbite includes a promise of transparency. Great point, because he always says to open up a sentence, "I'm not going to lie to you." Mild to heavy provocation, and an approach to accuracy that could be described as close enough. The second key to Charles Barkley's negotiating skills is that he is always available. Articles, television, podcasts, etc. In the same way Tom Hanks used to bless a new late night show with a guest spot, Barkley has appeared on the first episodes of Any Given Wednesday, the Manning Cast Get Up, TNT's NHL studio show where we thought he'd be an analyst in years past. This week he gave an interview to The Times about Inside's fate, despite protests from Turner PR and his co-host. There would be Dylan Byers of Puck News, who had his headline titled "The Barkley Sweepstakes," which is great, by the way. And here was part of that. Barkley will presumably play the field, but there's ample reason to believe that NBC will hold special appeal. NBC Sports chief Mark Lazarus was the man who brought Sir Charles to TNT, and he maintains a close relationship with the network. If Barkley were to leave, the rival networks would court Shaquille O'Neal as well, in the hopes of bringing the duo over together. Collectively, rather, Shaq, the far superior pro, is more of a role player in this space, which is a great point. An odd contradiction, as outlined by Curtis, was this. In an interview with ESPN Cleveland, Chuck was asked how vital it was to keep the NBA on TNT crew together. His quote, "It's not that important to me," adding, "I've got to make sure I look out for myself." Look, this was a shocker because all that we heard from many was how they wanted to keep the band together. And we all know that they are simply irreplaceable. Yet, Barkley would go on the air with Dan Patrick once more and say he would indeed love to stay together with his teammates and produce the show through his own production company, which is another wrinkle because there's more than one. I believe Charles has one, Shaq has one, and a member of the inside crew has one. So the question then becomes, whose production company would basically have the show and then distribute it out? Those are things that weigh in the balance because that's probably, I would have to think, one topic of discussion amongst many when it comes to the inside crew. Yet Michael McCarthy of Front Office Sports gave his perspective as well, and he says that Charles is playing the game well publicly. Before his latest retirement, Barkley announcement, that is, said he was open to a job change, even revealing he insisted on an out clause in his TNT contract if the network were to lose the rights to broadcast the NBA. He joked about creating a LinkedIn page. He also held out the possibility of hiring Shaq, Kenny, and Ernie for his production company, then licensing it out. One source told Tuned In that he believed Charles issued his latest retirement warning to make the media stop pestering him about what he is going to do next. The great thing about him is everybody expects him to change on a dime and say outrageous things. That's just Charles being Charles. Either way, it's his last hoorah on Inside, and if it is, it will be must-see. If you think he was outspoken before, wait until next year. If TNT does lose the NBA, I, as in McCarthy, could see Barkley taking a long vacation, then returning to the airwaves in a big money deal with ESPN, NBC, or Amazon Prime that could approach $20 million a year. At least he'd be secure in the knowledge he did everything he could to save the jobs of hundreds of colleagues at TNT. A totally fair point. I believe it was on Dan Patrick when Charles Barkley said, "These are people that my kids grew up with, that I have known for many years." You know, or maybe it was Ernie Johnson. It was one of the two. But they basically said they would bring their kids in when they were younger. And now because they've been together for so long and the crew has been together for so long and the production people have been together for so long, that they saw their kids graduate college and go out into the workforce or graduate high school. That is something that is irreplaceable, and why so many of these broadcast teams want to stay together. Yes, of course, they would go for another venture to make more money. But what we know from this show is, number one, they truly like each other. And number two, the sheer honesty that they give and the laughter that they have, the fun that you can tell resonates, bleeds through the TV and goes to their audience. And I am certainly one of them. What does Charles do? Apparently, it is totally up in the air, and he could be playing the media game. Quite frankly, because we have seen the flip-flopping over the years, only time will tell.